Welcome to Granny's Legacy Pattern Stitch Clinic. Today we're going to be talking about the turkey stitch, which is a very fun stitch to make butterfly bodies. So we are going to show how to do that butterfly body, and let's get started. So I have a butterfly pre-done here. I've got everything done. I've stitched around the edge with a little blanket stitch, got some antenna stitched. Now we would like to do a little body on there. So what I like to do is just take an air erase pen and give myself a line. And you don't have to do this, but sometimes if I don't do it, I end up with a curve in my butterfly. So if I give myself a pre-started line, it helps a lot. Another thing that is really a fun added dimension to these butterflies is the variegated thread. So on these we're using M5, which has a lot of variegation. And to be able to do the turkey stitch, I've been very selective on my thread. And so now I've got a very long thread length here. And usually I don't start with that long of a thread, but because on the butterfly bodies I started and I have kind of a pale place and then it gets darker and darker and darker towards the head. The little azure butterflies, I really wanted it to look like that, or the little Carner butterflies, and their butterfly bodies really do change in color. So I have selectively threaded two needles exactly alike. So I have made it so that I have a double thread, and that I have light to dark, and I probably won't get to this part of it. So I'll start with my light on the tail and I'll work to the dark on the head. So I have two, and they're very long because I want to take advantage of that beautiful variegation in the thread. So I've chosen to leave it really long. And the turkey stitch is so simple. So my tail is going to start right about here, I've decided. So I just take a little stitch and I hold on to the end of the thread, and then I put a little locking stitch right over the top of that stitch and pull it up tight. So that is locked in there. It's not going anywhere. Now I just go right on up the body, and as close as I can I take another stitch, and I'm going to pull it up pretty close because I don't need a very long turkey stitch, just long enough to hold that loop. So I'm holding the loop out of the way. Now I have to take a lock stitch on that loop, so I'm going to go in and take a knotting stitch right on top of that loop, just like that. Pull it up tight. Now another loop very close to it. Really get in there and get it as close as you can. You want these stitches to be very, very close together. And now a locking stitch. And then I'm going to go again, do another loop stitch. Very close together. And just hold it out of the way with your thumbnail. And then you're going to lock it. So loop, lock, loop, lock, loop, lock. That's all you do, all the way up the butterfly body. And eventually the thread is going to change color. To the darker. And if it's not changing color as fast as you'd like, if you want to get to the dark faster, then you can go back down knot off your thread, and then trim to where you want to start again. and start up. So I want it to gradually get into the darker part of the body. So I'm just going to start now with the tail, and I left a little bit of that light so that it would kind of blend in, and lock it in. So you can be kind of creative with this thread and use it to your advantage. You know, cut out the parts you don't like and use the parts you do like. Now it's going to gradually get to the darker color, and that's what I was trying to get to. And I got a loop, so now I lock it. And loop. And lock. And depends on how long your loops are. You maybe would have had just the right amount of thread. You wouldn't have had to trim any out of there either. Or you maybe didn't want it to get dark so fast. That would be fine too. Now as the body of the butterfly gets closer to the top, it thickens a little bit. So I may want to add a third row of stitching. So my plan was to do 2 rows side by side. But now in the thickness of the butterfly, I might want to add a third row. And here again, I'm getting those stitches so tight together that I'm actually, my thread is coming up in the last stitch a little bit, and that's good. Then you'll have a nice dark, deep, didn't get my locking stitch, there we go. And the head is kind of rounded, so up here I kind of add some extra stitches to make a big fat round head on it. I thought maybe that would be a good idea. So I'm just kind of going around. And then while I have the same color thread, I'm just going to go back in here, come back in the middle, and add a little bit of a third row right in here. So right tight up against my other row, I'm going to just start in and add a third row. And I'm using a lovely velvet, and velvet is, I'm trying to get through to the all the way through to the back. I'm not just hooking this in the velvet if I can help it. I try to get some of these stitches to go clear through to the back. So now I'm going to tie off here. We're not going to finish this entire body here on camera. It'll be a very long drawn out affair, I think. So before my thread changes and gets too light, so you don't want these stitches that are on top of the old ones, you don't want them to destroy your old stitching. So make sure when you go in there you don't knot off an old stitch there. So I'm going to trim that off because my thread is going to be changing colors and I don't want it to change. So there's the turkey stitch, 1 row, and then I've added a second row in the thicker part of the body here. Now I would start with my next thread that I made up exactly like the first thread, because I want the body to have the same color combination. So I'm going to start here. Now the second row needs a little bit of finessing because you really do not want to get these into your stitching. So what I do is I just flatten them down and hold them down, and they'll puff up later. It's better to get them back out of the way. So I'm gonna lock that first stitch in with a knot. And then I'm just going to go right up the body and add a second row of stitching right tight as I can get it to the first row. And here, once again, just try to keep those loops back out of your way. Is the camera getting in there good, boys?
I think so.
Good. We have Stephen and Isaac here today doing our videoing. And we like to get really close on these, but we also want to make sure that it's clear. And you just take your time on this, and the loops don't, the size of the loops, that part is not imperative. It's, you know, if you want a nice thick body on your butterfly, these have to be pretty close together. That's more important than the length of your loops.
And once you master this stitch too, it's fun to use for like flower centers. You can do so much fun things with the turkey stitch.
Mm-hmm. Years ago, we did a pattern called Holiday Stampede, and it had little, it was a Christmas piece, and it had little rocking horses on it. And we used the turkey stitch to make the mane and the tails, and they were, it was darling. Now,
And in that case, you'd make really, really long loops.
very long loops, yes. So now I'm kind of to the dark part of mine, and so I'm going to go down and knot this off and get to where I'm switching to dark, because I really don't want to have light coming up here in the dark part of the body. So I'm going to knot that off. Nip my thread up to where it's to the dark part again, so I'll put it on the table here so you can see I hardly am taking any off, but I just didn't have room for any more loops there, so I really want to get in there and get to the dark. If I'd have kept going and tried to use up that and make 2 more loops, it would have not looked right. So now, once again, the trickiest part of this is keeping everything out of your way. So don't be afraid to flatten these and get them out of your way. So I'm going to just use my thumb and get them over, and I'm going to kind of have to go in. So I'll pull that loop over, and then I have to put a little knot on that loop to hold it. So every loop has to have a knot. Every single loop has to have its own little knot. And this is, you know, usually when you do the turkey stitch, it's in rows, so you have nice straight rows, and this can be nice straight rows too. But also on the butterfly body, it really doesn't. It's so forgiving that you can just stick them in there, get them stuck in there really good and tight. Oops. See, if you don't get clear through the velvet, it just pulls through. So if you heard that snap, I didn't get all the way through the velvet, and it didn't catch the knot. So I have to try to get all the way through here into the backing. So we're almost to the top here. Now that we're this far, I think, what do you think, Kate? Should I keep going and try to get it all done?
Go for it.
Okay. I had intended to stop and just do half of a butterfly body, but I think since we're this far, we might as well just keep going. And so make sure you get those old loops out of the way before you put your knot in, because you don't want to destroy any of your loops. And add a couple more for the head.
This is just an interesting stitch to try if you've not tried it before. It's just fun and interesting, and it's one of those things that you do and you take it and you show your friends. They'll say, oh my goodness, how did you do that?
See, and then I caught one of the old loops, so I'm going to try to pull it out of there. There we go. This is when you try to get these in really tight. Something to be watched for. Okay, this is my last one. I'm going to knot it off, put a loop, come up in here, give it a good tight yank, and then I'm going to trim, and then it's time to fluff. Get them all stuck up, straightened up, so they're all straight and tall. Okay, would you like to do the haircut?
I certainly would.
Okay, I think I've got the loops all pulled up, and you can see I've got the ones that are the beginning ones that are just long. That's okay too, because you're going to cut them all off. But just before you start trimming, give them all a tug and get them, because we flattened them so much to get them out of our way. Now we've got them all fluffed up. And here's the scissors.
Okay.
We'll let Kate give the little butterfly a haircut there.
So there's a couple things you can do. You can go through and cut all the little loops first. Or you can just kind of start cutting. But one thing we're going to do, so it gives it a nice rounded effect, like an arc or a curve, a nice curve, nice rounded top, is we'll want to make sure that we cut the sides a little shorter than we do the middle.
And I always trim the loops first.
Yeah,
for
that's
some
what I'm
reason.
doing.
I like to get them all pulled up straight.
And you can kind of, you get a couple of them lined up on your scissor at a time. And cut through a few of them at a time. That's always nice. And a nice sharp scissors. Just like everything. Nice sharp scissors. Make sure I got them all. I think I missed one. There we go.
And I really like my short little Ginger scissors for this project, for trimming too. If you've got a Havel, that works nice, or the little embroidery Gingers are a wonderful little tool for cutting for haircuts.
Then I'm just going to kind of give it a mohawk, you might call it. Kind of pinch them all together and then just give it kind of a nice little trim across the top. And keep in mind, you can always take more off, but it's pretty hard to make it longer again. You can always make it shorter. So I always err on the side of starting maybe a little bit too long. And then I'm just going to take and kind of angle cut the side a little bit to trim that down a little bit. Maybe a little bit on the bottom, and make those a little bit shorter. And like I said, keep in mind you can always make it shorter, but it's pretty hard to go back and make it longer. So, and Mom has those pretty darn short, so we'll go a little bit. Maybe a little bit. And like I said, go at a little bit of an angle, and then you can get a really nice little rounded top. I'm gonna cut straight across the top and just shape it. Just work it and shape it.
I think too, the turkey stitch, a lot of people think they just give it a straight cut across the top, and I think that on almost anything it's prettier if it curves a little bit down to the edge. Not always, but a great deal of the time.
I think I just about have it. I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. There's one here that's maybe a little bit too long. Oh. And then a little bit maybe right here, and a little bit here. There you go. And you can play around with it
and take it outside and give it a good shake or vacuum it, and you've got a beautiful little butterfly body. And how cool is that?
And it changes in color. You have your light to your dark.
And that really, the thread painting, using the thread to your advantage, actually I think is half as important as a stitch.
Yes,
it's just as important as a stitch.
Adds to the interest.
Yes. So thank you for joining us on the Turkey Stitch Butterfly. and we'll see you again.